Hello, Stillwater. Welcome to the Still Connect podcast, a podcast all about Stillwater, Oklahoma. I'm your host, Denver Evans, a born and raised Stillwater local and owner of Stillwater Digital Marketing. Every Wednesday, I share a friendly chat with a local business owner or community leader that's helping make Stillwater a great place to live. Whether you're a longtime resident or just a visitor, this is your place to plug in, stay inspired, and still connect with the stories that shape our community.
I'm here with Anthony Croff with Oklahoma CareerTech,
Countryside Church, formerly a food truck owner of This Land BBQ. If you'd like to buy a food truck, it's for sale.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How do you price a food truck?
I'm a member of a couple of different Facebook groups that deal in that kind of thing. So I'm basically kind of checking comps in the market and trying to price it appropriately and based on some of the improvements that I made to it and that kind of a thing.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about the stuff that you're doing, like
Full
time, like CareerTech and stuff like that, but a little bit on This Land BBQ. What was that like? How long did you do that?
So the origin story, I always like to say This Land BBQ is a hobby that got out of control and kind of spiraled into a business. I have a buddy, Todd, that says everybody's a nerd about something, right? And so I became a nerd about barbecue. Alexis and I, back in 2017, every 4-ish years, Texas Monthly puts out an issue called The Top 50 Barbecue Joints in the World, because they're Texas, and so with Texas elitism, they believe that the top 50 is from Texas, right?
Right, of course.
So when that top 50 came out, we found out about this thing called the Texas Monthly Barbecue Passport. And that year, it was sponsored by Yeti, which is, of course, for barbecue dudes, it's perfect, right? Mm-hmm. So they had this passport where if you were one of the first couple hundred people to go through and visit all 50 of the top 50 in Texas, then you won all these Yeti prizes and you collect, and then, it's street cred too. You get your passport filled out. There was a sticker you put in the passport at each place, and it was awesome.
That's cool.
So Alexis and I have all the Yeti things. It's great. We also got to try, I had gone from like a person who was maybe had more than an average interest in barbecue to someone after tasting the top 50 in Texas. I was thinking to myself, what can I do to kind of get myself to maybe cook at this level, or what can I do to give it a go to see how far I can get with that in my framework of what's good and what's not. Mm-hmm. And so when we moved to Stillwater, we were, before we moved to Stillwater, I had a Traeger smoker, and I'd occasionally throw things on the Traeger and try different things, and I'd say it was just pretty average. I got a little bit better and stuff like that. But as you get better with kind of the seasoning and the trimming and stuff like that, well, then you start to think about, well, could I do it on a real stick burner smoker that requires a little bit more finesse? Mm-hmm. And thankfully, my dad, when we started wanting to do some caterings and some pop-ups, my dad bought me as a gift a 500-gallon smoker on a trailer, and that's the one that we did the initial pop-ups in Stillwater with. I believe that was in, I think it was September of 2020. I believe it was September 2020 when we did our first pop-ups, and it was out front of Blue Spruce downtown.
I remember that.
Yep. So Colby was so gracious because to give a little bit of context, when you're not a food truck and you're just doing pop-ups, you have to have what's called a special/temporary license. And so that requires me coordinating with the city to rent some spaces downtown to put all my stuff, and also to coordinate with the health department, because on a special and temporary license, they have to come check you every time you do it. And you have to pay a little fee every time you do it. And so my buddy Ross, we would use his pickup, because I don't even have a pickup truck for all these trailers and stuff, right? So buddy Ross, we'd load the awnings and hook up the smoker trailer. We'd go down sometimes on a Thursday night or really early on Friday morning, and we'd put out cones to save my spaces. So that's the funny thing is, even though you buy the spaces from the city, you're still responsible for marking them off so that they don't get taken.
Doesn't guarantee that no one's going to park there.
Right. So it's like 12 a.m. from Thursday to Friday, putting out my cones in front of Blue Spruce, make sure nobody copped those spaces.
Yeah.
Anyway, set up all the stuff. Friday midday or afternoon. At the time, I was working for FedEx, and I was off some Fridays, so I was coordinating with my boss to be off those days, of course. And so you'd have to have all your stuff set up, and then the health department would come inspect and check out your whole setup. You'd write them a check. They'd sign off the thing. Then I could start cooking. And those days, because it was pop-ups, I didn't have like warmers and stuff like that. It was like literally I had to time everything out. I was cooking all night so that I could do lunch on Saturdays, which most of the times those pop-ups coordinated with home football games.
Yeah.
The first one was just bonkers and phenomenal. And I, hired a bunch of my friends to come in. We had like the bean guy, the toasting the bread on the griddle person, and we just had an army of people, that was, we were building the airplane in the air. We were just, what have we got to do to get it done? And that was what it was. And I look back on those days with like a lot of, I'm sentimental about it, but also they were super hard. Staying up all night. Colby at Blue Spruce, talk about community in Stillwater, and a great dude. He's like, hey man, here's a key to Blue Spruce. Because I know you're going to need to use the bathroom, obviously, when you're cooking out here all night. Like, you need to go in, wash a dish or two. He's like, do what you need to do with this place. And so, really, if it were not for partnering with people and having friends and having people that are open-handed like Colby, those pop-ups really wouldn't have happened. And providing a venue. And he was even like, hey, like, your folks, when they come to your pop-up, they can come and use our restroom. They can come and sit at our tables and eat. And of course, I think he had also a nice little side aspect of it is, I said, hey, support Blue Spruce after your barbecue.
Right.
Get a gelato.
Get a dessert.
There we go. Well.
Oh, you guys had dessert, right?
Well, actually, when we were at Blue Spruce, we tried not to.
Oh, okay.
So that we didn't undercut that portion of it. So then I think it was about I don't remember. I think it was a couple years later. Our daughter had been born, and kind of with her being born, there's a little bit of an ebb in the frequency that we did pop-ups. But after she was born, I wanted to hop back into it. And that summer, ahead of the football season starting, I contacted the health department about, hey, like, I'm going to start doing pop-ups again. Like, I want to just coordinate with you guys on the schedule for getting temporary certificates. And they were like, hey, actually, we're not going to be able to do those temporary certificates for you anymore. And I was like, why not? And they were like, well, we were told not to. And I did the kind of like, well, let me speak to the manager. And they put me on a phone with a guy in Tulsa. And I was like telling him my story. And I was like, can we elevate this? He's like, I am the person it's elevated to. I was like, oh, I am talking to the manager. Okay. Sorry, man. But it was a situation, and I kind of understand it from their perspective. I was frustrated at the time. Looking back, I see, and now being like a state employee myself, right, with certain prescribed office hours, I can see how it was sort of a pain and a strain on the health department, where every time I'm doing a pop-up, they've got to coordinate somebody for their schedule to come on off time,
right,
on typical off time, to do my permitting process. Yeah. And so they said, hey, it's either got to be, and they did tell me, they said, we're no longer going to consider the home football games as a special event for you to set up at. So in the spirit of being a special event permit, they said, we'll still allow you to do tried and true, like if it's a special event with a poster and a flyer and a event coordinator and that kind of thing.
Right.
So I was frustrated, but at that point I had kind of two ways that I could go. It's like, I can either do this and only seek out tried and true special events, which is going to severely limit the frequency which I can do this, or I'm going to have to go the food truck route, which is a mobile license. But the challenge of going to a mobile license in the state of Oklahoma is you can't just throw up some awnings and throw up like an awning over your smoker.
Yeah.
The rules change. So you have to go to a fully screened in walled smoker, and you have to be in a food truck. So that required different equipment being shifted around, traded, bought. And thankfully, my dad helped us finance the food trailer part and upgrade the smoker. And it was really crazy. You know, I think God has his hands in all these things. And there was a guy in Austin that was shutting down his food trailer business, and he had 1,000-gallon smoker, covered, screened. It needed some patchwork on it. And he and I were coordinating, like, hey man, like I can't get down to Austin to see this thing. And like when I could go down, he's not available, you know, and that kind of a thing. And then one day he texts me, he's like, hey, I don't know why I didn't mention this. I'm actually moving back to Edmond, Oklahoma. Can I just bring the trailer up there? I was like, yeah, I could see it then like any weeknight. So I was also thankful.
I don't know why I didn't mention that I'm moving from like 5 hours
to Oklahoma,
45 minutes from you.
Right. I was also very, very thankful because that particular trailer is not easy to move. I don't move it very often at all. I was very thankful that he had to haul that from Austin, Texas, and not me. Yeah. So, God, thank you. And so, so the This Land story, I mean, really awesome. There was one night when Stone Cloud had a soft open night, and it was kind of just for like the cycling community. And so we had done a Wednesday night social ride out of district. That's a whole other long side story of part of our initial connection to Stillwater was Bobby Winnell and the Mid-South, which was the land run. Yeah. I did that in 2018, came up here.
Have you listened to Bobby's episode?
I have listened to a little bit of it. Yeah. And so Bobby and I are like great friends. And so buying my bike at his shop before we ever moved to Stillwater, coming up here and doing the land run at the time before we ever moved to Stillwater, and the friends in the community that just kind of captured us was a lot of the reason why we decided to move up here from Texas. And so in any case, I had never met Matt Sullins at Stone Cloud. Bobby, I was like, hey, dude, you've never met Matt Sullins? No. So he takes me in there. I was like, hey, Matt, like I used to do these pop-ups downtown, you know, because Bobby's telling about my barbecue. I said, Matt, I used to do these pop-ups downtown. I'm trying to transition. So I was like, I don't have a food truck right now, but I'm really heavily searching for the one. And he's like, hey, man, when you get your food truck, he's like, any Saturday you want, he's like, it's yours. You just let me know. That's awesome. So Matt just on a handshake agreement was like, I mean, just completely extended. And we went and before we got the updated smoker and all that stuff, we went and did a couple of like giveaways just because like, I mean, I'm the kind of person that I'm going to get the itch to do barbecue, whether I'm selling it or giving it away to you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it is. And so we went and were able to set up in the back and do some giveaways. It was like a July 4th weekend sort of thing. And then by September of that year, that would have been 2 years ago. Everything is run. Do you feel like everything has run together since the pandemic? I mean, just, man, my son was born January of 2020. And then the world shut down March. And I feel like ever since like he was born and NICU and all that, I mean, life has just been for 5 years just a dead run, you know, and exhausting.
My wife and I got married December of 19.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, there you go. So it's like, you know, BC. BC is before COVID, right?
Yep.
And AD, after disease. So man, but yeah, 2 years. So we had a run of about two years, 2 seasons at Stone Cloud. It was the perfect confluence of events that, you know, I think the Lord orchestrated for us to have been at Stone Cloud. The perfect timing for them, the perfect timing for us as a business, a great venue. I would get requests all the time, like, hey, can you come do our event? Can you come do our festival? Can you come do our this? Can you come do our that? And as much as I wanted to say yes, because, you know, I deal with being a people pleaser sometimes, it was like I had to sort of articulate to people like, I would love to come do that, but when I do Stone Cloud, that's like a sure thing. And they've been generous to give us a venue, and we come park there. They don't ask us to pay a thing to be there. And then they're giving us electricity. I think even like, I mean, not I think. They would even open like a tab for us, you know, have some, like if somebody's working for me, they could have some drinks or I could have some drinks. I always was very dehydrated doing barbecue, so I almost exclusively drank Stone Cloud Clear because I needed that like rehydration. You know what I mean? That's my favorite, and I'd always be a little bit chagrined when they'd run out.
Stone Cloud Clear.
Stone Cloud Clear, that's their sparkling water. It's their non-alcoholic sparkling water. And they've had a couple of different varieties of it, but the one I think that I liked was called Summertime Magic. And it was real lemon juice. So almost like a LaCroix, but not fake flavors.
Yeah.
Real lemon, a little bit of sweetness. It only had 30 calories. And it was perfect. I mean,
Nice.
a lot of times if, I was like super busy and hadn't had a chance to get a drink, Matt or whoever was in charge would be like, hey man, like take something to go home. And I'm grabbing that 6-pack of Stone Cloud Clear and I'm headed to the house.
Yeah.
And I probably had it demolished by the next day. But yeah, so and even, friends, like we don't even have our family, we don't even own a pickup. And so my buddy Ross McClure, who we've been church friends for all the time we've lived in Stillwater. Every weekend, his pickup is kind of his secondary vehicle. And every weekend coordinating with him, and he's like, yeah, man, come. I had a code to the pickup, go get the pickup. So, this land really, we really relied on community to get us through. And even our acquisition of our food truck, the food trailer, I went into Good Little Eater one day, and I had been shopping. Like I had gone and seen a food trailer down in McAllister, and it was a bust. It was kind of terrible. You know what I mean? They posted the pictures. It was not as advertised.
Yeah.
And I'm exhausting all the Craigslist, Facebook, Marketplace, all the stuff, looking at all the groups, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna have to spend weekends going to Dallas to find a food truck. And one day I go to Little Eater, and Sarah Ramsey is like, hey, this lady handed me this slip of paper. This person south of town is selling this food trailer that's at this horse dressage ranch. And she's like, I don't need a food trailer, but I know you've been shopping. And she hands me it's just a phone number. And I text the number. And long story short, that ended up, just falling into our lap. The food trailer I got ended up sitting 3 miles south of town.
Wow.
And yeah. And so, that was every step of the way, there was somebody, something coming through for us, for this land. And, I once, and of course, so people are probably wondering, well, then why did this land come to an end? And, I like to characterize it like this. The way that I personally have experienced God speaking to me is maybe not in an audible voice, but I would say like through confirmations in your heart, like open doors or closed doors, and also through circumstance, right? And I think a lot of us in our lives, we can look at what are the circumstances we're kind of coming into, and different people have different frameworks of belief, but I believe that we're not here by accident, and that everything happens for a reason, and those reasons are orchestrated by God, right? And so I was coming into, it was July of last year, the opportunity to come lead the music here at Countryside part-time came to me. It had been a conversation that had been opened up a couple times before in the years that I'd been here in Stillwater. And each of those previous conversations, I did not have that confirmation to walk through that door. I had been previously leading music at a church plant called Redeemer for 5 years, volunteering there. The church unfortunately closed a year and a half ago. And I had, in my past, when I was in Texas, I had 10 years of full-time vocational ministry under my belt. And a lot of why Alexis and I moved up here was because she and I were both working in full-time vocational ministry at the same church. And at this one particular church we were at for 4 years before we moved to Stillwater, we really almost burned out. We either were burnt out or we were really just on the edge of burnout. And that's not a good place to be. because you're not giving your all to the ministry and the people you're supposed to be serving and loving, right? When you're empty, you can't pour out. And we needed a reset and we needed a rest. And honestly, we kind of needed out of the big church bubble. When you're in full-time ministry and you're at a larger church, what can happen? And I don't think that people intend for this to happen, but what can happen is church and the things surrounding church become your life. And I'm not saying that all those things are bad, but what can happen is that, we're in a podcast about community right now, right? But what can happen is that I never think, now that I have some hindsight, I don't believe that that's the way that Jesus intended, was for us to live in a bubble, right? We've got to have close-knit community in the church, and the core of our community can be in the church, right? And the core of who we're sharing life with and sharing struggles with and deep stuff. But we've also got to have our eyes turned to our community, right? Jesus did, right? And that's some of the things that he got chastised for, right? It was, why are you hanging out with these people, and why are you out amongst these people? And at that last church we were at, I couldn't have really been accused of being out amongst other people, or even having missiologically my eyes aware to what's going on in my community. And so coming to Stillwater and just serving at a really small church plant with like no money, like hardly any resources, we're setting it up and tearing it down in a school week after week. Sometimes we have a band, sometimes we didn't. COVID, we met in a park. It was really the reset we needed. Because it was like, oh, I've got my core of community still within my church, but I don't have an overprogrammed ministry life, right? Where I think with a certain amount of sadness, I look back at maybe some of the things I did when I was in the big church world and thought, was that really ministry, or was that sort of like things that we got people's behinds in the seats and we called it that. And that's always a heart check that we're having to do when we're in ministry. I mean, Countryside is a large church. And even though I'm here part-time, I have that past perspective to continually ask myself, hey, are the things that we're doing, everything, I believe that everything we do communicates something to people. Right? From the time they walk in the doors of this church, everything we do musically, everything we're going to say or sing. And so I want to be sure that that's pointing people's hearts, hopefully, in the right direction. That starts with making sure like my heart and my motives are pointed in the right direction, right? So sorry to get off on a side thing there, but all that is to say that Stillwater gave us a chance to come into a community and truly be able to embrace and be embraced by everyone and everything around us. And I've heard you say on your introduction to the podcast, right, that a lot of people don't realize this is an incredible place to live and be and raise your kids, and it's just an awesome place, right? And so there's people in this town that I've already talked about who've given us a hand up, who've given us a break of some sort that we needed, who met a need. And so when I took on this part-time ministry here at Countryside, I knew that with the amount of volunteers that I'm needing to be available to and to pour into, that this land barbecue, especially with the age that my kids were at, or are at. I mean, Abner turned 5 and Agnes is about to turn 3. I just knew that I felt a confirmation right before leading worship one morning. I felt a confirmation like the season is ended of doing barbecue as a business. There was also a growing thing inside me, which a voice that got louder that was saying barbecue was more fun giving it away and doing it for friends and family and community than to put dollars with that. And Alexis and I were like, we could make it part of our budget and just save up and throw like 3 or 4 big like things a year and probably have a lot more fun doing it than trying to make it a business where we're doing it every weekend or every other weekend, where we're truly going to do it on our terms and still make great food. And because that's always been, that was my desire with this land, was never to build it into something that was our family's business or livelihood. I mean, unfortunately, just like you guys out there, the audience, and you, Denver, we all go to the grocery store and we see what's happening with prices. Unfortunately, there's not a secret realm that we get meats and side ingredients from that is cheaper than that by much, right? Food wholesale is not just meat prices, are usually meat prices. And, sometimes I'm buying briskets from Costco, just like everybody else is. Sometimes I can get a deal, but it just became really hard also to stomach selling barbecue at what you have to sell it for to make a profit. And it's just a fact that now barbecue, whereas it once was the everyman food, right, where it was like the cast off cuts of meat that you're smoking to tenderness and braising and all that stuff, now it's become like a boutique thing, right? And so now brisket is insanely expensive when, 15 years ago or whatever, it was like 99 cents a pound, 10 or 15 years ago. So now to go to have barbecue is like going to a steakhouse, right? So it's something that families and people have to plan for, and it costs a lot. And it just became really hard to, be selling somebody a $20 lunch plate out of a food truck. Not that it was hard to, we had people come, but it was really hard to just stomach that, and I know that the market is what the market is. And that was another hard part, is like, I'm so much more of a barbecue guy and like a passionate, try to make the best product I can person. And I'm not much of a want to sit down and crunch the numbers person. But you as a business owner that that's what a business forces you to do. And so that part of it became a drudgery too, is I did not like, I wanted to be like the make barbecue guy, the smoke meats guy, but it was like hard to stomach the business part of it.
Yeah.
So in any case, I rambled on there, but that's kind of the, does that make sense? Where it's like various things and various stirrings within you, circumstance outside of you and stirrings within you. There's a confluence of those, and what it creates is a confirmation in you that, hey, a season is over, or a season should continue. Right?
Yeah. I think we've all been through that. So that was always your side thing.
Right.
What was your full-time job through all of that, and now, and what all are you doing?
Yeah. So a quick synopsis of, after we moved to Stillwater, I thought that it would be really easy to maybe fall into a job somewhere. It was a lot harder than I thought. We moved up here with a little bit of savings, but I ended up taking a job at Starbucks for about a year, which was really tough. It was good. It was fun. It was tough though, going from, a full-time salaried thing where both Lex and I were working in Texas, to moving up here, making new connections. And I'm 35 years old now, working at Starbucks, and I was working the 4:30 a.m. shift and thinking, what am I doing with my life, as I stocked that pastry case every morning. Now, a good side of that is, at the time, I was training for a huge ride that used to be called the Dirty Kansas 200, is now the Unbound 200 in Emporia, Kansas. Yeah. And so the good part about that is I worked really early, got off around noon 30 or 1, and I rode my bike the rest of the day while Alexis was at work.
Yeah. So when I was kind of getting started with content creation, I worked at Aspen, and I would always try to work the mornings, which was like 5 to 11.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of nice. And I'm not a morning person, but it'll make you think like, Yeah. But, in any case, through working the window at Starbucks, I actually met Steve Irby and some of the guys at Kicker. Oh, yeah. I ended up transitioning over to Kicker. I worked in the warehouse for a hot minute, one of the guys in their marketing slash media department found out that through my work at church that I had some rudimentary video editing skills. So one day I just get kind of like teleported up to the to the marketing department, and they put me in my own little cubicle, and they're like, "Hey, we got some footage we need you to make some edits on." Sweet. So I'm like I'm in high heaven there, and but Abner was on the way, and they had moved me up there and allowed me to keep my it was just my warehouse pay, which was not much. They didn't really have some flexibility to create a new media and marketing position. And so then I had a choice to make. As much as I loved working for Kicker, like the culture there's awesome, love Steve, love my boss at working there. I needed to do something else, especially just like insurance, all those things play into it. And you got a kid on the way. And I went into like dad mode of like, I really got to buckle down and do what's best for the fam. Yeah. And thankfully I got a job at FedEx where I worked for a couple years. I actually was I was based out of Stillwater, but I was on this extended route going out to like Alva and Cherokee and all these towns out west. Yeah. And that was awesome because there's two kinds of guys at FedEx. There's guys that love the windshield time, or there's guys that want to be delivering like all day, stop. Yeah. I'm definitely a windshield time guy because I can eat up some podcasts on the way out and on the way back. And then I transitioned to running north side of Ponca City all the way up to Newkirk in the Kansas border, up there by Ark City. And that was my last year at FedEx. That was a lot harder route. And that was when we kind of got into doing the pop-ups and things like that. And so as Abner had been born. Abner was already almost a couple years old, and Agnes was about to be born. And I saw a job posting for a media and content creator at CareerTech. And I, again, like God's hand in everything. When I was at Kicker, one of the cool things that came out of that job, even though I wasn't in that department or in that role for a long time, was now I had a reel of stuff that I had a link already to. Yep. I sent it to CareerTech along with my resume. They called me back, got me in for an interview, and hired me really quickly. And that has been, CareerTech has been amazing. I work with, there's a couple of us video/media guys on staff. I work in a suite with a couple of graphic designers. And we have some copywriters, copy editors too that work in another office suite. And we are the communication, collectively we make up the communications and marketing department at CareerTech. So for those who, when I say CareerTech, sometimes people get confused. So I need to tell people that when I work at CareerTech, I don't work at Meridian Technology Center. Some people incorrectly assume that. Yeah. But the CareerTech State Agency is based here in Stillwater. It's right by the hospital. And I believe there's around 200 employees that are attached to that office, whether some are remote or in the field, and 150 or so are probably on site. And we not only act as the hub for all the 29, I believe it's 29, it's constantly changing because we're growing, but 29 tech centers around the state. We've also got what's called skills centers in some of the prisons that help give inmates skills. And we also serve as the hub for what we call the CTSOs, the CareerTech student organizations. So different states may handle this differently, but like in Oklahoma, like the FFA headquarters is housed in CareerTech. FCCLA, BPA, Technology Student Association, all those different things that students are involved in. We have coordinators that are housed at CareerTech. And so my job is awesome because anything that is cool that is going on in CareerTech, whether that's a success story with an incredible student or whether that's a new program where they're employing some type of really awesome technology, they're going to send me there and give me free reign to make a video on it. So sometimes it's just me rolling solo with a camera and mics and stuff. Sometimes it's with a colleague and set up a couple cameras. We also do some podcasts we've got a TV studio in CareerTech. at the office. And yeah, so it's fun. Our job is just to tell the story of CareerTech and what's going on. Now, the challenge of the job is that sometimes when we're making content, the audience can be a little ambiguous, right? Because sometimes it's like, is a student going to see this and get interested in a program, right, and go the CareerTech route?
Yeah.
Is a parent, everybody wants to think their work obviously has value, right? It's what keeps us all going. So sometimes that's been a little bit challenging. But the cool thing is when I find out, like, oh, a legislator found out about this CareerTech program because he or she saw a video, and now they know what those dollars are doing or how they can divert dollars to do more of that.
Yeah.
Or like a few times, I found out, like, oh, our one of my videos got played down at the State Department of Education to highlight what we're doing at CareerTech. So it's like, okay, cool. Sometimes, and I'm sure you having a podcast and a media company, you really have to reset your perspective. It's maybe not about the views you get, but some of those views being in front of the right people.
Yeah. And with us doing like small business marketing, each small business has a different audience.
Yeah.
For the most part, like we work pretty much exclusively with Stillwater businesses, but still different demographics. One will be like all college students. The other will be families, homeowners, older people who are looking at doing home renovations, carpet cleaning, all that kind of stuff. But then another is like sparrow beginnings, brides, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So very, very different.
Right. But at least you don't get for you, it's probably nice that you're able to transition. It's not like one thing every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The hard part is transitioning from one to the other midday.
Right.
You have to go from, all right, I'm putting myself in the mindset of somebody who, I want them to see this and think I need to renovate my bathroom.
Yeah.
And then I want, some like sophomore, junior at college, maybe senior in college who's just gotten engaged to see this shot of the venue, and they can't quite be the same style.
Right.
Yeah. They need to catch attention in different ways.
Yeah. Do you ever have to, like, not focus group that, but do you ever have to, like, reach out to somebody in that demographic that you're trying to get to and be like, hey, is this tone deaf? Am I on the right track, kind of a thing? Or have you done it long enough, you maybe just have a good enough feel for what's going to hit?
Yeah. And for a lot of our clients, they were already having success, but a lot of times the reason that people hire us is because they just don't have time.
Right.
It's not what they should be doing. Right. Like when you had, your barbecue company, it's like, you don't like doing social media. You like making barbecue.
Right.
So
yeah. By the way, the only reason we couldn't hire you guys is we just didn't have the margin to. Yeah. But here's the thing, right? Being a like you said, it's the time, right? It's not necessarily the know-how or the want to, because like at CareerTech, obviously I produce content. I know a little bit about editing and using a camera.
Yep.
I would have loved to produce like my own little documentary about a day in the life of this land.
Yeah.
But it's just impossible to do while you're doing the thing.
Yeah.
And so I totally get why somebody would have a third party come in and, do that.
Yeah.
So there were times where I would have friends, come work with me and stuff like that, and they'd be like, "Hey, man, I really don't know much about food or food prep. I don't want to mess anything up." But it's like, just like, "Hey, I just need you to be a clean set of hands," and I'm just gonna be like, "Pick up that, hand me that." Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, "There's nothing I'm gonna hand to you that won't be."
So tell me just how you feel about Stillwater.
I love Stillwater. I love that for me. I think for my wife and I, and the things that our family has. We're coming up on this end of this summer will be 7 years that we will have been in Stillwater, and so the honeymoon period is definitely over. We got through the initial honeymoon phase of. Yeah. Gumdrops and lollipops, and I'm just riding bikes every day my kids have been born both at the hospital here, and we've been through a lot here. And And Alexis and I both have said that in the couple of places that we've had to move in our marriage, that Stillwater is the first place that ever felt like home, that ever felt like, oh, this is the community. This is a place where it's like, I'm not here transitionally because I'm going to build something here in Stillwater as far as a career or whatever, that I'm going to transition somewhere else or scale up somewhere else. I have no hopes and dreams and aspirations of moving and living anywhere else now that I'm in Stillwater. I can't say that necessarily about previous places I've lived. Not that I didn't love aspects of those places and still am well connected to people there and friends and people I love. But, it's just one of those feelings when you get somewhere and it's like, this is home. This is where it's at. And I'm not going to choose somewhere else to build a life. This is where I'm going to build a life.
What do you think contributes to that feeling, or those feelings, I should say?
I think it all comes down to people. It's like I said, the people who are willing to stick their neck out for us. The people who are willing to just be our friends, to accept a couple that moved up from Texas because we were connected to a church plant, and this had met friends through the bike race, and then everything just kind of flowed out from that, and it's just it's the people. And I do think I listened to parts of Bobby's. He did talk about how Stillwater punches above its weight, is what he said, with what this town offers. I feel like, and you've been here a long time, Denver. Your whole life, right? So
27 years.
So I don't know if this makes sense, but I feel like there's almost like with Stillwater, there's almost like a Venn diagram. There's like the OSU realm, right? The OSU universe, and there's the Stillwater town universe.
Yeah.
And there's crossover of various things, right? That Venn diagram sometimes moves where
as soon as you said Venn diagram, I just pictured blue and orange.
Yeah.
Like I knew exactly where you were going.
Exactly. And the beautiful thing about Stillwater is we're two different groups. We're groups of people that are planted here and are going to make their life here and are going to be here. We're also a crossroads, right? Of maybe students who are going to transition in here and transition out, or maybe people who are going to work at OSU who are going to transition in here and transition out. And that part can be really hard to stomach, because what happens is you end up making friends with amazing people who there's a fuse on their time here, and they leave. Some decide to stay, and some leave. And I mean, you can't fault it. I mean, there's only so many jobs and so many things to go around. And you come here to OSU, you get trained in a specialization, or you're moving up in your career, you're going to naturally maybe leave.
Right.
That part is hard, but there is also interwoven that beauty of, after being here 7 years, you're like, oh, these folks are here, and they're going to be here. And these folks are the folks that, like, I mean, Sarah Ramsey at Good Little Eater. I mean, my kids go and hey, Miss Sarah. I mean, Sarah gives them a hug. I mean, Sarah, she's loved on my kids since like day one. It's like that, like thinking about those moments, like these are the moments my kids are going to look back on. Right. And they're one day they're going to be telling their kids, like, man, I used to go to this place called Good Little Eater with my parents. And I used to go in there, and Miss Sarah used to give us hugs or give us free cookies or get, whatever. And to think about, right, the things that were integral in my childhood growing up in various places, but to think about how my kids are planted here and the people there, we have a picture of our kids. Like when we came, so even though they were born here, we ended up having NICU stays with both of them in Tulsa. Mm-hmm. But when our NICU stays were over and we came right back to town, I think we took both of them by district bicycles, like when they were infants.
Yeah.
And I think we have pictures of both of them, being infants, like being held by Bobby Winnell.
That's awesome.
And it's like they saw that one day in my Google photos, and they're like, Dad, that's me as a baby. I was like, yep. They're like, why is Mr. Bobby holding me? I was like, I don't know. We took you by the bike shop because that's what felt right. That was our that was our community. That's our community hub.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just a great place. I mean, that's what's funny is, not to knock, you know, if any of my Texas friends listen to this, don't think this is a knock or whatever, but you know, Texans pride themselves on being like the nicest people in the world, right? I think Oklahomans are as nice and maybe even nicer than Texas.
Sorry, Texans, that was a hard knock. But you know, I mean, Stillwater's actual, and I believe it's actually a trademark tagline, is America's friendliest college town.
Yeah, and I think it really is. And you know, I love. One thing that's really interesting is, like, before I moved to Stillwater, I had pretty much next to zero interest in following college ball whatsoever. And now, even though I really don't know really anything about like schemes and plays and how these guys are moving on the field, I'm just barely trying to keep up with where the ball is going, right?
Yeah.
And is it going in the right direction? Man, I love, and I know we can get into the NIL and all that stuff. I still love on a game day, I love the pageantry of college football. I love driving down by OSU and seeing all the tailgating set up. I love going to a game and seeing alums that went here to Stillwater. And I love one of the things that I loved doing was after the last Bedlam game, I was headed to church that next morning, and I was just like, I left a little early, and I was like, man, I'm just gonna go drive the strip.
Oh, yeah.
And it was awesome. It was like thinking about, you know, there's trash and stuff, you know,
Right,
but it was like, this is cool. It's almost like a cathartic moment knowing, man, all these people influxed into our town for a few hours to watch this game. And then they had this kind of raucous celebration afterward. Some of them,
Yeah.
half of them. And then to just kind of like think about the aftermath of that and to think through history, the stories that those streets and the roads in Stillwater could tell. Actually, you know, Washington Street is a strip, obviously. You know, you can only go down so far on Washington Street before it cuts off, and then you have to go a little bit out of town to get back on Washington.
Out to like 44th.
Yeah,
something.
and so when we would do Monday night rides, when I first moved here out from district, the Monday night ride, now it's I think the Wednesday ride, but the weekly social ride was always hauling all the way down Washington, almost all the way to Perkins.
Yeah.
Not Perkins Road, but Perkins the town, and turning around and coming back. But there's this one place on
I
Washington
know exactly where you're talking about.
that I love, you know, where you can turn around. It's at the top of the Washington Hill.
Yep.
Excuse me. And you turn around and you see Edmund Lowe Library.
Yep.
And I just think about, I don't know, I just get this, it's like, man, to think like students long ago coming, you know, down these dirt roads to go to college, or down whatever roads were paved or improved back then, to come to this place. Yeah, I don't know. It gives me, I think the history of Oklahoma as a whole and of Stillwater is fraught with a lot of some negative things, but to think about the hub that Stillwater has been, the history of people who have come through here. It's kind of funny. There's a lady that works at CareerTech. Her name's Jordan Duck. And one day I was like looking at videos about the history of Stillwater on YouTube, and I watched this one about, it was about the history of OSU. And her husband Jeremy pops up on this video, and he's like, "Yeah, my great granddad gave the land." And I was like, "Oh, when she's Jordan Duck, that's Duck Street.
Duck
Duck.
Street,
Yeah,
Duck,
it's like, so it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
And I do wish, this is just, you know, me growing up as a country music lover when I was a kid. I do wish that they'd never torn down the Garth Brooks house. Come on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. By the way, fun fact, and of course you don't have to include this in the podcast, but you remember the eve of that house said Garth Brooks lived here, and it had the years that he lived in Stillwater.
Yeah.
So I was riding with when I was training at FedEx, I was riding with this guy named David Meyer, who he went to OSU.
Oh, I know David.
You know David Meyer? Yeah. I was training with David Meyer. I was riding with him. I was basically his runner. This was COVID times, and long story short, FedEx had all these rules and wouldn't let me drive yet.
Yeah.
So I was discussing with him, like, man, they tore down the Garth Brooks house. No. And he goes, it used to say Garth and Sandy used to live here. I was like, are you serious? And I verified that with some other longtime Stillwater person. Apparently, I guess when they split up in the 90s or whatever, that whoever owned that house changed it to Garth lived here.
Interesting.
Yes.
Very interesting.
We're going deep on the Garth lore.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just, I don't know. My kids probably, it's also, I think, a funny place to bring up kids because we're like a small town, but then we have these big town things, right?
Yeah.
Because of OSU. We've got a stadium, and so like my kids probably think it's typical for a town of our size to have a stadium, and they're going to grow up and be like, oh, wait, every town doesn't have a Boone Pickens stadium.
Yeah. Well, and even like Stillwater High School stadium's really nice compared to, a lot of others.
Right. Oh, I didn't even mention that I went through Leadership Stillwater Class 31.
Oh, yeah.
And so for anybody listening who loves Stillwater or is even new here and not sure if you love Stillwater, go through that, apply for that, and go through that because it's a good way to also fall in love with Stillwater and have like a really great appreciation. I remember you saying in your introductory episode about, some of the negative fodder that people unknowingly just spew on community pages and such about businesses, right?
Yeah.
Because they disconnect that those businesses are owned by people who have real lives and real feelings and real struggles. And people do need to be held accountable sometimes, and people do need to do a better job sometimes, but you got to be nice about how you go about it. But I think also like Leadership Stillwater was great to see and meet the people who really make our city work, right? As far as from a public works perspective and a governmental perspective. And it gives you sort of a lot more of an appreciation because, it's like I said, you get people who hop on there and why doesn't the city do this? And why doesn't the city do that? And they don't know like, hey, there are actually people working those jobs that are trying their best with the resources they have to make our city good. It's like, take it easy.
They almost need to document Leadership Stillwater.
There we go. Leadership it was.
You know what I mean?
It was funny. I actually thought of if I'd had more forethought before I went into Leadership Stillwater.
Yeah.
It would actually make a funny like Leadership Stillwater the show. Like where we all were when we started, and then how everybody came out of it, sort of a thing.
I was gonna say, how close would it be to like Parks and Rec?
Exactly. And then you could play into all the stereotypes about those leadership programs. What would happen if 15 bankers and 15 realtors got together for 4 months of leadership development?
That'd be great. That'd be really great. We just need like a Stillwater documentary that people can just go and watch to see all that stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah. I know you're going to have to really cut this down, but
No,
I got
not
on my soapbox, but that, yeah, I love it here. I love what you're doing with this podcast. I think stuff like this is awesome. I hope we can get it, all the things you're doing to a broader audience.
Yeah.
And at least it'll be archived for folks to listen to.
Yep. Awesome. Any final thoughts?
No, just thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to Still Connect. I hope you enjoyed getting to hear from Anthony, and there's always more where that came from. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to follow us on social media to stay in the loop, as well as share this with all of your Stillwater friends so that we can grow this podcast, these conversations, and ultimately our community. If you want to go a step further with helping bring these stories to life, consider supporting the podcast on Patreon, where you can get early access to episodes, a peek behind the curtain at the podcast making process, and a shout out on an episode for as little as $5 a month. With some of the higher level tiers, you can get access to things like patron-only polls, special requests for the show, access to online Q&As, and in-person and virtual hangouts with me and your fellow patrons. No matter what your capacity for supporting the podcast is, every little bit helps grow this amazing community. And we all need community, so even when life gets busy, make sure you still connect.